Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Roderick Sams, and I am the Chief Development Officer for Centegix. And we're excited to have all of you today as we have what I think will be a pretty engaging discussion regarding a timely topic, one that is high on the minds of school leaders, but also those who are responsible for providing quality instruction across the United States and elsewhere. So we're talking about how we can connect school safety to teacher retention, recruiting, and wellness. And so with us today, we have a very important panel group that I'll introduce in just a second. But before we begin, I did want to give a few housekeeping rules. Everyone right now should be in listen mode only. And then, of course, if you have questions, which we will entertain while we're going through the presentation, please put them in the question box in the GoToMeeting panel, and we will get to those questions as we can get to them. But then, of course, there will be time at the end for any remaining questions that we do not get to during the presentation. So again, we definitely appreciate all of your attendance and appreciate your willingness to spend a little time with us as we talk about this topic. Today, we have two very esteemed, as I mentioned, leaders in the state of Georgia. We have Chief Thomas Trewick, who is the Chief of Safety and Security for the Clayton County Public Schools here in Metro Atlanta. And we also have Mr. Jay Floyd. Mr. Jay Floyd is Superintendent of the Hart County Charter System, which is also here in Georgia. And again, we're excited about having both of them today because both of them bring a very specific perspective to our topic today. And we think that it's going to be pretty engaging. We think it's going to be pretty interesting and also informative. So again, we're very excited to have both of these gentlemen with us today. Chief Trewick, would you like to say any opening remarks before we get started?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. This is a timely topic, and I really look forward to the engaging dialogue and answering any questions that our audience may have. So just really pleased with being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Floyd, you've been a school leader, a district leader for many years in this state. Definitely want to give you an opportunity to share your beginning thoughts before we begin our portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sams. From my point of view, we'll be coming from expectations, and what are expectations of the district, what are expectations of the principal, what are expectations of the school level, and it goes along the lines of if you expect it, then inspect it, and how does that impact your culture of your school, how does it impact your teachers, retaining teachers, also hiring teachers. The fastest form of school improvement is when you hire somebody, you just either got better or you stayed the same. So that's an important aspect, and Centegix brings a lot of pieces to the puzzle as a solution for the teachers, and it gives them power in their hands. So, Dr. Sams, I appreciate it. Thanks for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so one of the things I did want to share as we go through and share kind of our topic, we want to give some baseline, right? Some baseline for today's conversation. And so as we go through, we're going to be talking very specifically about data that we've captured, and also talking very specifically about how that data can be used and applied to school improvement, as Mr. Floyd just mentioned, but also making sure that it is able to respond to anything that happens in the school that requires additional support. And so we have also included as a part of our conversation today thoughts from teachers from around the country, teachers that work in districts that we partner with here in Centegix, and we're excited about hearing from them specifically during this presentation. And so this is the opportunity for us to look at this topic, the topic of teacher retention and school climate, and leveraging the data that we are capturing within our crisis alert system to inform decision making, right? Decision making at every level, not only at the superintendent level, as Mr. Floyd will speak to, or at the law enforcement level, as Chief Trewick will speak to, but also those that are school-based and also classroom-based. So this is kind of the segue or the beginning point of our discussion today. And I'd like to start with this quote that I see that is very timely. And this quote is from a teacher, a middle school teacher in Florida, and it reads like this: "I like having the security of knowing that I can get help quickly or immediately. It was very quick and I appreciate that." So as we think about the things that happen in schools today, we think about the incidences that impact teaching and learning. Knowing that there is a way of making sure that if I need assistance, if I need help, if I need support, that I can get it timely is very, very high on the minds of teachers across the country. And so the big picture idea that we're going to be spending some time talking about is not just the fact that we're only talking about safety ideals when it comes to incidences, because we're not talking just about the big things that unfortunately have happened throughout our country, most recently in Texas, but we're also talking about the day-to-day things that impact teachers and others' ability to impact learning for students. The data itself is critical, and we're going to talk about data throughout this presentation, but data without impact is really not necessarily the most important feature of this. Response leads to prevention, which is, of course, one of the major things. We want to be responsive, but we also want to have things in place that prevent incidents from happening. And so, of course, the support that teachers are needing every day is really, really critical. And that is from the beginning to the end, from the start to finish, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, or the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And so how teachers feel supported serves a big role in how effective they are in providing instruction. So what I'd like to do is ask for Mr. Floyd to give some perspective a little bit on kind of what his thoughts are around teacher support and making sure that teachers have tools and resources needed in order to perform at the highest level instructionally.
Thank you, Dr. Sams. The teacher is the CEO of the classroom. And so the teacher is in charge of everything that occurs in that classroom, except for sometimes they really don't have much charge of the safety and security aspect. And so what Centegix does is it puts that power in their hands. You're going to hear Chief Thomas talk about the seconds and how much they mean in an incident. And so you're giving the power to the teachers that eliminates minutes, seconds, repeating of information, repeating of knowledge. And that alone gives a teacher a lot of comfort in the classroom, knowing that that people are seconds away, that people are just right there, you know, the minute that I use my alert system. And so I think as the CEO of the classroom, you give them the tools that they need for every area of instruction and every area of teaching. And also we should be giving them everything that we can to keep their classroom safe. Can we always prevent any kind of incident in the school? That would be difficult to say that you had a magic bullet where you could keep everybody safe. But the one thing that we can do is we can train our teachers to keep themselves safe. We can train our students how to keep themselves safe. And I think that's the big part of this whole piece that we're talking about, is empowering people in the building.
Chief Trewick, I've heard you make a comment before about having the ability to alert for things that are bigger than just security incidences or law enforcement issues. Would you care to share some of your thoughts? Because they're very profound, and I think it would add some context to this part of the discussion.
Absolutely, Dr. Sams, and I appreciate it. You know, there is definitely a correlation between safety, retention, recruitment, and wellness. Because let's be quite honest, you're not going to, first of all, have anyone to come to your district if they consider your district as being dangerous. They're not going to stay if they consider the school itself as being dangerous or less than safe. So when I think back to when I started in 2016, I made sure that I had small sessions with the school administration, but I would have separate sessions with teachers. And one of the things that some of the teachers mentioned was that on occasion, when it came to safety and security, they didn't feel supported. They felt like on occasion, central office or people at higher levels did not understand their plight in the classroom or have forgotten what it's like to be a teacher, at least in the 21st century or 22nd century here. So what I wanted to do, because I understand when it comes to safety, you don't have minutes. You have seconds to make a decision, secure a school, and deal with the incident as it is. And, most often when we look at a crisis, when you're thinking about systems like Centegix, people think about the big national newsworthy stories that come across. But in my district, the teachers were more concerned with the day-to-day activities and getting an expeditious response to that classroom. And their concerns were with students who have maybe food allergies. They were concerned with students who would have medical emergencies. And they were concerned with situations involving threats of violence and fights, because those are the things that you're going to see day to day. And they wanted to know that they had the support of safety and security, not knowing that they were in the building, but they had the ability to ascertain an immediate response to get not just to the classroom, but know where to go, because you can have situations too where you don't know exactly where the crisis is. And Centegix provided that tool to not only give a notification if necessary to the entire school, but it can actually go and identify where this incident is occurring, so that the medical team, whether it's the school nurse, the school resource officer, the principals, the school administration, they could get to that classroom rapidly and mitigate the situation. So as I stated, there is that correlation in making teachers comfortable, giving them a tool that they can rely on to get them assistance when they need it. And Centegix does that.
Thanks, Chief. I greatly appreciate your commentary, and also Mr. Floyd, your expertise in this area is critical. And so as we transition, one of the things I think is also important is because as Chief mentioned, and also Mr. Floyd, many of the incidences that are occurring are dealing with things that are as a result of circumstances that may be beyond the control of the school or the school district. Obviously we are still being impacted by a pandemic. That pandemic wreaked havoc on the ability to provide instruction in what would be deemed normal ways for several years. And students returning back to school, returning back to campuses, are coming back with a lot of challenges, not only challenges academically, which is what many people have spoken to, but also there are some behavioral and health challenges that many of these students and adults, by the way, are coming back to school with, and it's impacting that academic performance and that academic support that school leaders are grappling with on a daily basis. This quote from an elementary teacher in Indiana really is clear to form for this particular part of our discussion. Any teacher with a child who has seizures, 3 pushes and your hands are free to help assist a child. Teachers are more than just teachers. They're nurses, they're counselors, they're advisors, they're supporters. And so many of them take on those responsibilities, and they take them on willingly. And so as we start thinking about the ways in which we can support teachers' ability to be all of those things, but then keep their eye on the instructional process is key. And Crisis Alert, it has been designed with that in mind, right? We designed the product with the idea of providing that level of support in a way that doesn't keep the teacher from continuing to engage in the areas that matter. So as we look at the data that we're sharing here now, we're seeing an uptick in response, numbers of alerts, and it speaks to a lot of what I just mentioned, right? Many of the things that students and adults are returning back to the school campuses with. And those numbers have stayed high pretty much throughout the course of the year. And so what that says is that we still are needing the additional support that a crisis alert can provide. Chief Trawick,
Yes.
I know one of the things that your department does is just simply provide support beyond just the issues that a traditional school security or school safety office would do. Thinking about the medical pieces that are happening, or the challenges that many of our folks are coming back to school with, have you supported that in the way in which your district finds valuable and is providing that additional support for teachers, students, and others in the schools in Clayton?
Absolutely, Dr. Sams. Your data is on point as it relates to what we're experiencing here in Clayton County. I'm just going to be real honest with you. This year has been a trying year, what relative to mental health challenges and other medical emergencies. It's not just the mental health. Also, fights and disagreements are on a rise. And, with the school resource officers here, the SRO program, and I tell my officers, don't rely on the S, which stands for school, and don't rely on the O, which stands for the officer, because it's apparent you're a police officer. I told them to put emphasis on being a resource. What we don't want to do is criminalize our kids, but what we want to do is be a resource, not only for the student, but most importantly for the teacher. You can't have teaching and learning if you have an environment that's chaotic and unsafe. So I want to make sure that those teachers have the ability to get our attention so that we can get there and be a resource. And with the rise in numbers of alerts that we've received, the teachers are very appreciative of having the ability to notify us, because unfortunately, we've had a significant increase in our medical and mental health challenges within our classrooms. So what we do, we get there, we stabilize it, we assist the administration as well as the counselors with getting those students some support. In turn, and in return, we support the teacher by pulling that student out, putting that student in a safe environment so that we can get those extra services. And I think the most surprising piece of all of this is the support of the parents, because the parents understand that we're intervening not to bring harm or disassociate their child from that learning environment, but to get the child as well as the family the resources. And that's what this crisis alert system does, because without that expeditious response, things can kind of spiral out of control, and you can lose that teacher-student relationship based on the challenges. And I'm sure Superintendent Floyd can respond to what that looks like when we don't have that quick response and the teacher has to operate outside of the teaching area of responsibility.
Great segue, Chief. Mr. Floyd, I'm pretty sure as some are looking at the data showing here, there could be surprising that elementary school, by and large, would have more alerts versus middle school and high school. Most people would probably think it would be the reverse. Can you share a little bit about, in Hart County, how the ways in which you've leveraged data like this to inform your decision making at the superintendent level, and then empowered school level leadership to look at how they can use this to inform the improvement processes that the district is undertaking?
Yes, Dr. Sam, the highest percentage of alerts that we have currently in our district is the staff alert, which 99% of the time is going to end up equaling to a medical alert. And so what you have to think about, though, in comparison, because it's so much different to us now, we still have to look back at the way things used to be. And if you think about the way it used to be, is I may be a special programs teacher at the high school, and I have a seizure in my classroom. That teacher might not have the authority to immediately call 911 on their own. may have to get in touch with an administrator or a school nurse, and it kind of goes from there depending on the severeness and the history of the student. So now, and just recently, I mean, the fact that you bring this up is kind of amazing. I received 2 letters from current parents that the history of their students has been serious seizures. And so they grew up in our district, and so they know the difference in how the responses are. One of the things that you need to know the background, we do not have a local hospital. So we have to go to the next county in order to take a student if it requires that they have to go to a hospital. So we don't necessarily have that available. And so I got the letters from the parents were just thanking the school board, thanking myself. I cannot believe that you have this system in place. I would hate to think of the situation that my son would have been in if the response was not so fast, because immediately that teacher hit their button for a medical alert. Everybody was alerted, 911 was called. And those of you that are administrators that might be in my situation, I don't know about you, but the way that our board members are, they expect to be notified anytime there's a medical facility, unit that's called to the school, or if there's a police unit called to the school. So what that allowed me to do was I get the alert, I see what's going on at the high school. So immediately I can send a text or I can call and say, hey, we've got a student that's having a seizure. It's being handled. 911 is on the way. I'll keep you posted on the student, that kind of thing. That's all that they want. You know, they want to be informed. They don't want somebody in the community to come up to them and in their business or wherever and say, well, why is all the emergency vehicles over at the school? You know, they'd like to be a part of that process. So that was one little thing that solved for us. But over beyond that was the letters that those parents sent and said, I'm not so sure what would have happened if the response was not as quick as it was. And we are so grateful for that. Our parents are grateful for that. Our community supports us having crisis alert and Centegix because they know and understand how it operates.
Well, that's great, and that really does underscore the need for fast and targeted response, right? Response needs to be quick, it needs to be fast, and it needs to be targeted, which means it needs to be location driven, right? Where is the incident? Who triggered it? So that way the time element is actually on our side versus working against us. So those kinds of statements and comments are really critical as we continue to understand, you know, how it actually improves teacher retention and school climate. So
Dr. Sams,
yes.
can I mention one other thing that really
yes, sir.
sparked my attention when Superintendent Floyd mentioned the fact that people having the capability to call 911 or may not be authorized, et cetera. And I'm sure our listeners are probably in the same situation we are in my county, where sometimes, even if you have the authorization to do so, we have spotty cell phone service in some of our buildings. So what makes Centegix so attractive, at least for me, is because it does not rely on cell service and it's still going to operate. So that helps me out tremendously because, and it gives a sense of satisfaction to the teachers too, knowing that even though we might have spotty cellular service in the building, my device is going to work regardless whether we have cellular service or not. So I just wanted to mention that for our listeners, because I'm sure some of them are in the same situation that I'm in. I can go in some buildings and my cell phone just won't operate. I'm sorry. So it's nice to have that.
Yes, the fact that, you know, we're not reliant on cellular support is critical in many of our schools. You know, they're older schools or they just are literally massive, and the cellular capability and even some cases Wi-Fi capability is limited. So having the ability to communicate and create alerts and have those alerts responded to without those types of restrictions makes crisis alert really a tool that is readily not only available, but you're able to get the kind of data that we're talking about today. And I think that's really, really important. We talked about the medical data initially, and we do know that those are the types of things that are impacting, you know, lives, impacting performance and impacting, you know, schools. But by and large, student behavior is really still the biggest trigger of alerts, right? It is still the reason why alerts on a day-to-day basis are leveraged probably more, and in many cases, much more than any other type of alert. And so as we think about from one year to the next, how student behavior continues to be a problem, we talked about this earlier, right? Students are coming back to school. They've been out of the school environment for over a year in many cases, and they've gotten some things probably in place for them that has made coming back to school challenging. And so this quote, I think, is really one that a lot of people can speak to. It's a middle school teacher in Texas, and she says, a student was provoking a fight in the hallway. As soon as I realized it was escalating into an actual fight, I pressed the alert. I was in a location that would have been difficult to alert other adults. So this system was needed. And so it kind of goes to your point, Chief Trawick, when you mentioned about some places in a school not having adequate cellular or Wi-Fi support, and also in a place where there's always those nooks and crannies in a school. You know, prior to me working for companies like Centegix, I spent 12 years as a principal, last 3 years as a high school principal. So I know that students know where the areas are in schools where, you know, whether it's camera coverage or whether it's just, they know adults are not readily in those areas. And so having something that, you know, can be viewed and used so that when everyone sees something or anyone sees something that they can actually leverage an alert and respond, you know, sometimes mitigates or even prevents some of these incidences from occurring. So Chief Trawick, talk a little bit about your experience in de-escalation and also leveraging crisis alert as a way of doing that actual practice that law enforcement officers and school resource officers spend countless time and many, many hours taking training for, that thought of de-escalation.
Well, you know, Dr. Sams, when you think about a school campus, school campuses are large when you're talking about square footage, when you're talking about classrooms, nooks and crannies, and things of that nature. Not to mention your exterior recreational type areas, your softball fields, you know, your basketball courts, etc. And typically, schools will only have one, maybe two school resource officers, and it's impossible for that officer to be in every place at every time when a situation arises. So, you know, when you mention situations such as a fight being provoked, because we see that quite often, you know, fights start because of conversations or disagreements that leads to the provocation. So we've had many of occasions where, whether it was recess or whether it was students were out in gym class and they were out on fields or in those areas where they decide to assemble, where teachers have seen the initiation of problems and challenges and notified the SRO, and the SRO could get there to mitigate and de-escalate the crisis before it got out of hand, and use conflict resolution and other processes to de-escalate, including peer mitigation as well. So I've seen it as a valuable to show a decrease in our numbers as it relates to fights, because we have seen, of course, the alerts come, but we've seen a decrease in suspensions because we're able to get there and mitigate those crises. And in my mind, to school administration, that's positive when it comes to reducing your numbers of in-school, but particularly out-of-school suspensions. So I think the crisis alert system has given us unintended positive outcomes, because we bought it for one reason, but we're receiving residual returns through our ability to get there and de-escalate situations.
Thanks, Chief. Mr. Floyd, I'm sure as you have conversations with your teachers in your district, many of them are talking very specifically about these types of incidences. They're talking about the behavioral incidences that have crept back into schools or crept into schools that may not have existed at the levels they have or they are in recent years. You've been very outspoken about how you've leveraged crisis alert in showing both your current faculty and staff, your current teacher staff, but also those that you're recruiting and those that you are looking to bring into your district in order to provide that quality instruction. Can you talk a little bit about how you leveraged not necessarily the data specifically, but just crisis alert as a tool that you've used for teacher retention and teacher recruitment?
Sam's, yes. Teachers want to know that they're going to be safe and they're going to be safe in their classroom. It might not be written in every school improvement plan or plans that you have throughout the district, but in the back of school board members' minds, in the back of the superintendent's mind, the principal, you know that from being a principal, security is probably top of the list of everything that you do. So when you are interviewing for teachers, and what we have found just about 100% of the time, and as our teacher shortage grows, it gets more difficult to hire teachers that are well trained. And so if you get into a highly competitive situation with another school district, what we have found 100% of the time, because we have the safety plans in place that we have, and we have the crisis alert within the classroom that puts the power into the hands of the teacher, many times that seals the deal as far as us getting the nod for the job, because as we move forward, we have found we are in some incredibly highly competitive situations trying to get the best teachers. You know, I'll be honest with you, from a superintendent standpoint, and I try to make sure I teach this to our principals, and there are probably a lot of other administrators that are out there. The fastest form of school improvement is when you hire somebody. You either just got better or you're worse than what you were. And I hate to say it, but 9 times out of 10, hiring is the name of the game. And then being able to retain them and keep them and train them, not only in your safety aspects, but train them in how to be a good teacher and give them the tools that they need. But so many times when it comes down to it, when our principals are able to physically show them when they come to the school, to tour the school, or to have their interview, and they can physically show them the alert that we have in place, the solution that we have in place, most of the time that seals the deal, because that's just like what Chief Trawick said earlier. They want to know that I am in a school that's safe. They want to know that they're in a school that they have options to be taken care of. And you think about some of these teachers in their classroom. Sometimes they may be great kids, but they're grown men that have some type of adversity that occur. And not every teacher, I taught in the classroom, not every teacher as big as I am that can handle that kind of thing. So you have teachers in there that they need that support, and they need it right now. And I'm telling you, the more that you use it correctly, the more that it serves as a deterrent. Chief Trey mentioned that earlier. It is definitely a deterrent as far as your behavior. And crisis alert is a great solution for all areas of the school.
Thanks so much. We greatly appreciate that commentary, and it really does lend itself to the idea that as we start thinking about all the things that impact school performance and school climate, school support, school improvement, we do know, and as we've talked about in our earlier part of our discussion, that not all incidences are about safety and security. Not all incidences are about preventing or dealing with a discipline issue or a law enforcement issue that may involve students, adults, or even outside of the school environment. Many of them are really dealing with the types of incidences that are impacting the health and wellness of our school populations, our adults, our students, et cetera. And so these are continuously growing incidences that are impacting, a lot of the way in which we are operating with our partner districts, right? We are providing this level of information, and we're giving it to them over time, right? So you're looking at it from year to year, or from beginning of the year, the end of the year, and then beginning of the year, and vice versa, because we want districts to be able to use information to inform their decision making. Some of it may deal with resource allocation or resource equity. Some of it is truly making sure that your school safety planning is working effectively. Sometimes it's really about making sure you have the resources that may not even be available, that there may be investments needed. Superintendent Floyd, one of the things I think would be critical for you to respond to is that as a superintendent, you're continuously having to look at the resources that your schools and your district is allocated. And sometimes it may be the need for, additional support, especially in the medical arena. Can you talk specifically not only about how you've managed to do that as a primary decision maker in your district, but also some examples of how it's made a difference, especially in the health and wellness area of either your adults, your staff, or your students?
Well, what we did, Rocky, is we used the Carl Vinson Institute through the University of Georgia to help do our strategic planning. And in our strategic planning, those specific questions were asked our community about how important that was. And it was overwhelmingly strong suggestion from our community that this was important to our school district. And so our school board has decided that, hey, this is top of our list. These are the things that we're going to do to help provide this support for our administrators and for our teachers. But not only that, that communication has reached out to our community, to our parents. I think that you have to really work at it. It's something that doesn't just automatically happen. You've got to have that relationship with your law enforcement. I can't say enough about our law enforcement here. I thought that we really had a strong relationship, but I realized until we got crisis alert and Centegix, we really didn't have a strong relationship. We had assumptions on both sides, but when we started meeting together and talking together, and we realized all the holes that were in our current system, and we were able to fill those holes, man, I went away from that meeting. I met with every law officer in our county, and I went away from that meeting. I was truly encouraged. We also had EMS there, and you think about the perspective from their advice that they gave us. It wasn't only seizures, and it was food allergies in the elementary schools. It was all of those things, and a lot of them are life-threatening. And so to be able to have that type of response, and not only to have that kind of response to go to the right school, to the proper school in a quick time, but also once I get to the school, I can go to the proper door, the proper location, to where that also cuts time. It's like Chief Trawick likes to say, it's seconds. We're talking about seconds. And so when you have everybody on the same page and you're having that communication, I can't imagine now in Hart County, if we were to say we're not going to have crisis alert or Centegix, it would be a huge problem for my seat. I can tell you that right now, because our parents kind of expect it.
So Chief Trawick, as we think about not only what Mr. Floyd has shared, but also this quote that comes from a high school teacher in Florida. My student would have died or been severely brain damaged without the badge. Chief Trawick, you talk about it. Mr. Floyd just alluded to it again. It's about seconds. Sometimes those seconds is the difference between a tragedy or a triumph. And so can you spend a little bit of time talking about it from your lens, and just really drilling in on that seconds aspect as it relates to how you and your team have responded to situations and how it's made a difference?
Absolutely. I'm really pleased with Superintendent Floyd and his understanding of gaps, and the fact that there are a lot of assumptions out there, but we don't know what we don't know until we all come to the table. And I think that's what Superintendent Floyd found out. Because of crisis alert, Centegix forced everyone to come together. And we all have different lenses, you know, from a law enforcement perspective. You know, I agree with this. Not all incidents are strictly about security, and it isn't. And that's why we have to be a resource, and we have to bring everyone to the table, collaborate, so we know who's responsible for what. And it comes back to what was said. Once we have filled those gaps, we can turn minutes into seconds with the help of the notification. Because prior to the notification, we had no idea where the incident was occurring. I'm going to be honest with you. I've had SROs just wandering around the school trying to find out where the incident is. We have the ambulance at the front door when really they should have been to the rear, and not really knowing which classroom where the response was. So now if you have a kid with an allergy, a peanut allergy, and their lungs are closing in on them, that's a rather precarious situation that's going to cause a teacher to go into a panic. A teacher isn't a nurse, even though they have to operate in those capacities, but that could be a little overwhelming for a teacher. So when you have a device that can get you to that location in a rapid manner, it's game changing in my mind. And like they are in Hart County, we cannot, if we try to do away with crisis alert at this point, I hate to put it bluntly, but heads would roll because we have become dependent upon it. The teachers know it works, and the community, you know, you have to understand the community supports it as well. So, you know, thank God for it.
Thank you. And again, seconds. We're talking about seconds here. We're talking about, you know, the time it takes to get to a situation and provide the support necessary could be the difference between a tragedy or a triumph. And so we're talking about, you know, again, the alerts and where they're coming from, who's triggering the average number per user, et cetera. But what that really says is that teachers and staff are asking for help probably at a greater level than they have in a long time. And many of those are, again, the day-to-day things that are impacting their ability to perform the thing that they have worked for and have dedicated themselves to, which is supporting the educational process for young people across this nation. And so as I think about this quote coming from a high school teacher in Georgia, it resonates with me because, of course, as I shared earlier, I spent several years in K-12, my last several years as a principal. And when you're talking about safe and secure measures, this is the best safety measure I have had access to in the 16 years I have taught. I truly love how this system works, from the ease of use to the information that automatically goes out to the school, letting us know what's happening. This makes me feel much more safe, secure, and safe. So it kind of goes to the point that you raised, Mr. Floyd, in regards to how you've leveraged crisis alert and how you've used it as a teacher recruitment and retention tool, but also just in the conversations you're able to have with your teachers about having that secure environment help them perform better as teachers, right? Help them perform better in their instructional process because they don't have to worry about whether or not if something happens in their classroom or in the building, that help won't be on the way as quickly as possible. Can you speak a little bit to how that has impacted school improvement in your district?
Yes, I can. If you use it, if you practice it, which you have to, just like anything else, just like I said before, if you expect it, then you've got to inspect it. So if you use it on a regular basis, because it becomes second nature to the teacher, and it's not something that they're afraid of, and it's not something that they're scared of. And then as we move forward, we have found multiple uses for crisis alert. Just a simple thing as, you know, sometimes in elementary school, you get kids that are runners, say, for example. They're runners and they're hiders. And so you take the class to the restroom, you have a little bit of a break, come back, and you got a teacher that's there with the kids the whole time, and all of a sudden, hey, little Johnny's missing. We actually had this occur in the school. And so there is no telling where that kid might be. Teacher didn't panic, just did a simple alert. the staff was alerted, and then within the minute, somebody contacted and say, I've got him right here. It was not an issue, where normally if that occurred, it ends up being a major issue because of the channels that you have to go through to get in touch with people in the administration and making announcements and all those kind of things. And so it has served us well, but at the same time, I think as teachers get used to it, and like I said, one of the things you have to do is you have to use it, you have to practice it. If you're going to have a lockdown procedure in your safety and security plan, for example, you have to use it so that teachers have a comfort level with that and what exactly that means, what it looks like. And so that part, that piece, as far as the retention part is, hey, I know that my school and my district is doing everything they can to help me so that I have complete 100% comfort in my classroom to teach. And like I said, it's all about teaching them those skills to do on a regular basis. For example, if you go back and look at the data for the mass shootings in schools and that have occurred, almost 100% of the time, if a classroom door was locked during the school day, that classroom was safe. And so it's about teaching these teachers and teaching them how to keep themselves safe. It's about teaching our kids how to keep themselves safe. And then the teacher can be used as their most important tool. And that's having a relationship with that kid. They can spend 100% of their time focused on these kids and teaching them and getting them exactly what they need, because the bottom line, it comes down to those relationships. And so with that tool in hand, it takes that piece away and any anxiety that might be there because of some type of incident may occur in the classroom. It's odd that you bring this up because we have had this conversation already this year with our first year teachers. We have a new teacher orientation regardless of what district they came from. And already this exact conversation came up. And then when we were able to explain and we were able to make sure in detail they knew what was available to them, it was almost like you could see the air just release. And then I'm okay with it. I'm good going in as, you know, I'm going to be trained. I'm going to have this tool that I've never had before. And so it helps us to, as administrators, get them focused on the job at hand. And so we're very grateful for that.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. I mean, your commentary on this is really impactful, not only because of the work that you're doing in your district, but also the thought leadership you bring to it. And so as we think about this, Chief Trawick, anything additional you want to add as it relates to just that notion of that idea that individuals can come to work every day knowing that they have the ability to ask for help and get it in a timely fashion?
Well, I totally concur with Superintendent Floyd. We've had conversations with our teachers and we have practice drills and they are extremely comfortable with the crisis alert system, Centegix. So, you know, I would only add that you have to practice, and with practice comes comfort. With comfort comes memory. So they are very pleased, and school districts, our listeners, you have to leverage this, you know, because if you are out there in this competitive market attempting to recruit teachers and retain teachers, you know, you're going to have to leverage this because teachers are going to go where they feel safe and they feel supported. And Crisis Alert Centegix provides that comfort. So I 100% concur with Superintendent Floyd.
Thank you so much. You know, as we think very specifically about Crisis Alert and the way it's designed and the fact that it is a wearable badge, in many cases, it really does lead to something that I know, Chief Trawick, you talked about, and that is the need for having a discretionary way of alerting and how that can impact the incident itself and how it can help to de-escalate the situation. So in this particular quote, which I think leads into a conversation that I think you can shed some light on, there was an incident in my classroom that required assistance. The alert system was very helpful in de-escalating the incident. The response time made me feel confident that administration would be there for me in the future. So that we talked about de-escalation earlier as relates to the training aspect that your team goes through, and that's very impactful and important. But also as we start thinking about how we can prevent situations from actually occurring because of the way in which crisis alert performs. In many cases, without a badge or without a wearable panic button that crisis alert is, you would have to leverage all other kinds of resources, whether it's cell phones or landlines or intercoms, wall panic buttons, app-based systems, etc. The discretionary piece is kind of out of the door when it comes to those kind of systems. Can you name a specific incident maybe in which a discretionary nature of crisis alert has led to a de-escalation of an incident?
Well, absolutely. We had a weapon in a classroom, and I'm kind of ashamed to mention that, but you know, it's 2020, and we're in the 21st century here. But of course, if you have a weapon in a classroom, you need a discretionary practice. You need a way to get help there without alarming the particular student who may be in possession, if that makes sense. And to have that, to be able to hit the button, get some assistance to your classroom, and then identify the threat and mitigate the situation was very helpful to the teacher. And for us, it provided us that opportunity not to create a situation of panic, which it could have happened, but because everyone remained calm, the teacher was very confident in the system that we had in place. We were able to get there, secure the weapon because the officer came in, had a private conversation with the teacher. The students really didn't know what was going on. The teacher understood that the weapon was there. It wasn't exposed, but it was in the classroom. Now, had she had to use other means, the word would have gotten out. It would have caused a traumatic type of situation and a crisis, and it could have gone in a totally different direction than it did. The officer was able to isolate the student, get the weapon, mitigate the situation, contact the parents, and we had a good resolve to something that could have been devastating. So discretion, in my mind, is really important when it comes to de-escalating situations. And I'm sad to say that we've had to secure a weapon out of a classroom, but unfortunately, that's the climate in America right now, and that's the situation that I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because again, that's something that's close to the minds of all of us as it deals with making sure that our classrooms are as safe as possible for our students and our faculty and staff. Mr. Floyd, anything you'd like to add in relationship to this particular topic?
Yes, one incident that we had occur was at our middle school, and then you know how social media that we have to deal with it as administrators as much as we do anything. But a student had posted on social media that he was going to shoot the school. Now, what that means, I don't know. You're going to shoot the building? What are you going to do? So you really don't know what that means. And so one of the important parts of crisis alert at Centegix is it empowers every employee. We've primarily been talking about teachers and teacher retention, but it's every employee in the school building has the authority to be able to alert somebody. So we had a custodian that knew that this student had posted this information on social media, had showed himself branding a gun on social media, and the comment that he had made. Now, we had learned about the comment, and so you're trying to respond as fast as you can the next morning. What bus is he on? What, how can we make sure we get all that taken care of? Well, guess what? The kid got to school early. Custodian was there early. Custodian's staff knew about it, was able to alert. Fortunately, the kid wasn't planning on doing anything, but he did come to school the next day. And so the custodial staff was able to alert, and it was immediately taken care of. We would call the parents. Hey, let's have a conversation. We call our officers. Our officers came. Let's have a conversation about what's posted on social media. So that's one of those things that, that shows that every employee has the power to be able to do that, and to think that what kind of confidence that gave that person and it gave our staff was amazing. And we're just fortunate nothing really happened, but it showed the power of what could be done.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Floyd, one of the things I just want to literally highlight is that 100% adoption piece is really critical, and that every adult in your district, every adult in every building who sees something or hears something can say something is really making sure that everybody's a part of the process. You know, safety and security is not just an individualized situation for a classroom or a school or a district. It involves everyone. And so we need to make sure that we are providing that level of resource and doing it in a way in which everyone feels like they can be involved. So in our last few minutes, I want to highlight something, and it's from our esteemed panelist, Mr. Floyd. And it goes like this: our principals are over our safety and security plan, and they go over what we have available in Crisis Alert. This is what you have available to you in your classroom. And more times than not, it usually seals the deal. Even if we are neck and neck with another county recruiting a teacher, that usually seals the deal. Having Crisis Alert, having a tool that you can speak to with confidence to any prospective teacher, whether they're a beginning teacher, new to their career, or one that's looking to move from one district to the next, having a resource is really making a difference, not only in Hart County, but in every district that we work with, not only in the state of Georgia, where we are today, but also throughout the country. And we're very, very excited about having leaders like Mr. Floyd, leaders like Chief Trawick, share their thoughts and their ideas. A few key takeaways that I want to share before I give our panelists one last opportunity to share their closing thoughts. Having a plan in place not only leads to faster response, it can lead to fewer incidences that require response. So that deals with not only responding to incidents, but also preventing. Teachers value the support that comes with clear, precise, and reliable crisis response. So being able to know that if I need you, someone is actually coming is making a difference for teachers. And trends tell a big picture story about what teachers see on the ground every single day. So every day it's about how do we provide that environment that is making the environment that is conducive for teaching and learning, that is providing that safe and secure, safe and supportive learning environment. And so we want to make sure that we end our conversation with additional thoughts that we are not able to cover in our conversation earlier. So I'm going to start with Superintendent Floyd. Superintendent Floyd, are there any closing comments you'd like to make at this time?
Yes, sir. We are creatures of structure, and believe it or not, we like structure. Sometimes we might kick and jump about it and not really happy about it, but in the end, our students are the same way. Our teachers are the same way. They like to have structure. And so what Crisis Alert does is it brings structure to your safety and security plan. It ought to be a part of everybody's safety and security plan. It should be a part of your strategic plan and instructional learning for your school district. And so it provides that structure and the ability to take that piece, and that piece is out of the puzzle now. Now we can focus on learning. We can focus on our relationships with teachers and kids. And so that part is very important. And I think number one that you mentioned on the takeaway, having a plan in place. You have a plan in place, and then you work your plan, and your plan, like Chief Trawick says, becomes second nature to you. That's very important to have that structure.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Chief Trawick.
Well, I'm going to close by saying, to our listeners, the school year 2021, 2022 was extremely challenging. Coming not out of the pandemic, but learning how to have teaching and learning in a more traditional manner was challenging. And I imagine we're going to have some more challenges to come. But with having challenges, we have tools. And Crisis Alert is a tool that provides comfort, that provides your students also with the comfort and structure because they know what to do, whether it's a large event or a small event, whether it's a medical situation or whether we have inclement weather. So I think the more we practice, the more we become familiar, the better off we will be by using Crisis Alert, Centegix Crisis Alert. So we love it. And I encourage all of your listeners, do this if not for yourself, for your students, staff, and faculty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Floyd, Chief Trawick, for your time today and your thought leadership in a very timely and very important topic. I want to close with a couple things. There was a question that was asked earlier in regards to the presentation. Yes, we will make the presentation available to all of our attendees. And I want to close with this last quote in regards to an elementary teacher from Florida who says, "There was an incident in my classroom that required assistance. The alert system was very helpful in de-escalating the incident. The response time made me feel confident that administration will be there for me in the future." So the closing comment is this: Crisis Alert, Centegix, we're partners. We are partners with our districts. We are here to provide that level of support. We are here to make sure that that level of comfort that allows all of our adults and all of our students that attend school every day can feel confident that if there's help needed, help will be on the way, because seconds matter and all these situations. And so we want to make sure that we are here with you every step of the way. So on behalf of all of us here at Centegix, we thank you for your time. We thank you for your patience and sticking with us. We did go a little over time, but we definitely appreciate you sticking with us. And we hope that you'll attend all of our additional webinar series here in the very near future. Thank you so much.